It's been over 3 years since I quit drinking. 3 years, 3.5 months, 1,174 days of sobriety. At the time I quit, I wasn't intending to change my whole life. I just had some annoying health issues that I wanted to get rid of. A nutritionist told me to eliminate alcohol, coffee, and most of what I was eating, so we could add foods back in to see what was bothering me. After a week of my elimination diet, though, I had realized that alcohol was the whole problem. It was obvious in hindsight, so I just quit drinking, and things have never been better. Moving to Spain when I was in my early 20s was a great decision. Adopting certain parts of the Mediterranean lifestyle, wine with dinner and later wine with lunch, was less brilliant. Beer or cocktails between meals was also a mistake, obviously, but I ended up doing that too. At the time, it was an unquestioned fact that red wine was a health food, all those antioxidants, you know. Drinking every day was actually healthier than not drinking. Science said so, and I believed it. That whole thing is a bit of a long story that I've talked about in a couple of other episodes, but people have since asked me what it's like being sober in Spain. On the practical side, one thing that a lot of people enjoy about life in Spain is being out at bars and restaurants. The good news is that most places now have alcohol-free beer that you can order if you're not drinking. Ask for a 00 or cerveza sin alcohol. I'm sure there are places with mocktails as well if you're into that. And nobody's going to force you to have wine at a restaurant if you'd prefer to have water. There's plenty of social drinking going on. Vamos a tomar algo? But if you go to a bar and order a Coke or a tonic or a cup of tea, nobody's going to be bothered. I can think of a couple of times that I've been in some random place, a kebab shop having lunch for example, and some tipsy old guy comes up to tell me that he thinks alcohol-free beer is pointless. Thankfully, that's rare, and if you're an American living abroad, you've probably had all kinds of other dumb conversations with strangers. It's not the end of the world. Besides my wife Morena and the people who read this blog, I didn't really tell anyone I'm on some big sobriety journey, and no one really asked either. I usually just say something like, the doctor told me to stop drinking, and people don't have a lot of follow-up questions. Hey everybody, it's Daniel. Welcome back to Spain to Go, the best podcast in the entire multiverse for all things Spain. This is episode 143, and it's all about being sober in Spain. And things are about to get a lot deeper, so stay tuned. First up, if you would like to support this podcast, head over to expatmadrid.com/donate and send some money my way. expatmadrid.com/donate is the best way to support this podcast so that I can keep making episodes regularly. I enjoy doing this and it's an outlet for my creativity, but it is a lot of time I spend. So if you send a donation along, I'll be able to do more and better here on the podcast. I'll also give you a shout out on a future episode. I appreciate it. expatmadrid.com/donate is the donation page. You can send anything from €10 on up to however much you want. You could also do a monthly recurring donation. That's on the same page, expatmadrid.com/donate. Thank you very much. Let's get back to sobriety in Spain. Before getting sober, I read that sobriety makes you finally deal with whatever issues you were repressing by getting drunk. Without the crutch, I was going to have to face my emotions head on. Well, that doesn't apply to me, I thought. I'm not repressing anything. I really thought that. Then, about 3 days into sobriety, I was sitting in the park near my house when I suddenly had a moment of clarity. It was like an alcoholic fog had lifted off my brain, and suddenly I saw that everything, all of creation, was incredibly beautiful. It was a warm spring day, big white clouds floated across the sky, the sun was shining through the leaves at just the right angle. German tourist girls were out wandering through Barcelona on their way to Arc de Triomphe, and the whole scene was just perfect. Everything is a miracle, I thought. How did I manage to miss this for so long? In that moment, and in many like it over the next several months, I started to believe in a higher power. Turns out my brain likes doing spiritual things. That's what I was repressing all those years. I don't know how common this is. It's not the kind of mainstream trauma people talk about, but it's my experience and it probably resonates with somebody out there. As I progressed through the weeks and months of sobriety, the alcoholic fog lifted further, and I was able to remember that actually, when I was in my teens and 20s, my brain did this sort of spiritual stuff a lot. I didn't know what to do with it at the time. Technically, I still don't. Sitting around being insufferably deep probably works if you're a philosophy major with family money and a large trust fund. I was a college dropout with a minimum wage job in a room in a shared flat, so my emotional depth was annoying rather than charming. Looking back, I guess I learned to pick up a glass of wine so I could fit in. I needed to dumb down my personality and seem a bit more fun when I had a hot date or went out to parties. Have you considered that the whole universe is interconnected? And here we are, sentient primates, descended from the trees, able to experience the miracle of existence, to philosophize, even write poetry about it. Amazing! That's weird, but not in a fun way. And sitting around contemplating universal oneness isn't really conducive to doing normal date-like things or making small talk with the in-laws. A couple of girls dumped me specifically because I would sit around being deep all the time when they were just hoping to have fun. That was actually the whole life plan for 2 or 3 of these Spanish girls I dated back in the day. To have fun. I thought it sounded like a pretty stupid plan, and I suppose they were right to dump me. As an introvert, I've received a lot of social pressure to be fun and try to entertain the extroverts. God forbid that the extroverts should ever not feel entertained in my presence. And especially when I was younger, there was a lot of social pressure to be fun. There was dating and nightlife, clubs, parties, friend groups, and drinking is involved in most or all of it. I remember the Sunday afternoon many years ago when some French girls I knew introduced me to bar hopping. We walked from place to place around La Latina in Madrid, having a couple of drinks and a few bites of food in each. We didn't have bar hopping back in the Arizona desert where I grew up, or French girls. I was hooked immediately. Not necessarily on the alcohol, that would be later, but on the lifestyle. Luckily, my 22-year-old liver could handle it. By the time I got to my mid-30s, it seemed like a good idea to dial back the fun and start taking better care of my health. In the meantime, though, I had moved to Barcelona, where I could spend all day drinking at the beach. On the other hand, I had gotten into a steady relationship with Morena. No more dating. So eventually, I just quit drinking for the most boring of health reasons and started to readjust to sober life. The first thing I had to do was to rebuild a sober identity. Once the novelty of being sober had worn off, after a couple of weeks, I realized I had to come up with new ways to spend my time. I had to create a whole new sober identity, really. A new lifestyle, with hobbies beyond bar hopping. A few weeks later, a friend randomly asked if I wanted to try Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I went along. I didn't actually enjoy it at first. You spend a lot of time being crushed under sweaty dads. Guys with many tattoos would strangle me in several positions, and then I would go home and have dinner and try to sleep, my heart still racing from the exertion and the adrenaline. For 6 full months, I didn't like jiu-jitsu at all, but I realized that the environment at the gym was good for me. Being surrounded by middle-aged guys who were in great shape was going to rub off on me sooner or later, so I stuck with it. I had always thought that health nuts were sort of lame, sad people. What I didn't know is how good it feels to work out every day, eat clean, and get 8 hours of sleep. So now I go to the gym, I eat protein and vegetables, I drink water and coffee, and I feel amazing. I don't miss the booze at all. I also don't miss the hangovers or the waking up at 2 a.m. with a huge cortisol spike or the puffiness or the joint pain. So let me share some of my top tips for sobriety in Spain. I realize I'm spending a lot of time here repeating things I said in my 2 previous sobriety episodes. I think that's probably because I don't have much more to say about being sober. 3.5 years ago, I was having several drinks a day. Now I have a life without the physical, mental, and financial strain of an unhealthy addiction. But it's just a normal life. There's not much to comment on. So my big advice for being sober in Spain or anywhere else is 1. Find a healthier social group to hang out with. 2. Work out as much as your body can handle, and that's probably a lot. 3. Start developing your spiritual side. And 4. If you have any doubts about how to get started, buy a copy of Alan Carr's book, Easy Way to Control Alcohol. It's about $6 or $8 on Amazon. It's literally the best money I have ever spent. Alan Carr, Allencarrr. The book is called Easy Way to Control Alcohol. He's also got books on stopping smoking or stopping drugs. The book helped me a lot and I highly recommend it. Anyway, sobriety seems pretty simple, doesn't it? At least on paper. But everything is in the execution. As far as the details of how you execute those first 3 points, it's up to you. You will need to find a healthier social group, and that probably means leaving some of your drinking buddies behind. You will benefit from working out as much as you can. What kind of workouts you choose to do is up to you. I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, like I said. I also lift weights, I walk a lot, and I go cycling across Spain from time to time. About developing your spiritual side, I think that helps a lot. It's definitely helped me, but I'm pretty quote-unquote agnostic about what spiritual or religious tradition you decide to get involved in. Find something that works for you. I'm practicing a big mix of religions at this point, and that's what works for me. I do think that believing in a higher power who is largely benevolent and wants you to succeed is a worthwhile tool to have while conquering your addiction. It's not an accident that Alcoholics Anonymous makes mention of God or a higher power in 6 of their 12 steps. It works, even if you don't literally believe it. Just treat it as a thought experiment if you want. What would I do if I knew there was a higher power who wanted me to succeed? How would I feel? Putting yourself in that frame of mind can work wonders. Almost anything is better than the addict's mindset, in which you're riding the waves of dopamine and worshiping your own hedonistic impulses above all else. You may need to get some support here in Spain or wherever you are if you want to quit drinking. This is something I don't know much about, but there are definitely English-speaking AA groups in major Spanish cities, and probably anywhere with a large expat population. I've never been to a meeting, but I guess it helps a lot of people. The Alcoholics Anonymous website lists several active groups here in Barcelona. Just Google around and you'll probably find something. When I was first contemplating quitting, I read a lot of blogs written by rehab clinics, so I know those are around too. If you need support, get it. One thing I've learned from publishing a couple of articles about sobriety is that by the time people reach a certain age, almost everybody has either been through this struggle or knows somebody who has. So you're not alone. The final section here is called Drunk Expectations versus Sober Reality. All in all, sobriety isn't what I expected it to be. When I was drinking every day, I just assumed that sober me would be white-knuckling all the time, using huge amounts of willpower just to keep from drinking. But it's not like that at all, in my experience. I quit drinking and I'm done. I don't want to drink. I just want to live my life as best I can. I'm fine with not being fun and missing out on all those antioxidants. These days, when I read my old articles, I see between the lines the alcohol-fueled nihilism, and I cringe at the sarcastic and somewhat angry worldview. I feel bad for that guy, lost in his alcoholic fog. But that guy was me, and he was living the Spanish dream. That's about all I've got for today. Thank you very much for listening. Please get in touch if you have any questions or comments about this sort of thing. I do have some PSs on the blog post here that are relevant to the topic, so let me read those really quick. The first one might be useful to people thinking about moving to Spain, because I also cringe a bit these days when I see people commenting, "I just moved to Spain and oh my god, the wine is so cheap here." Well, yes it is. The wine is cheap, but believe me, making it a big part of your lifestyle is going to be expensive in the long term, in more ways than one. I'm sure all of the people at the English-speaking AA meetings were once just having fun and enjoying life. Anyway, I talked about society's terrible messaging around alcohol in my article from the Bahamas. That is episode 83. It's called Sober in Paradise. My other article and podcast episode about sobriety is from Dublin. It's called Sobriety and Introvert Hell in Dublin, Ireland. Dublin is kind of a famous city for drinking. So going there 3 months into my little sobriety journey here was quite an experience. That is episode 47, Sobriety and Introvert Hell. So you can check those out. Episode 83 and episode 47 both go into a bit more depth about this whole sobriety thing. There's a section of the Bahamas article that I thought was so important, I republished it in a PS to this article. It's about the terrible messaging around alcohol in mainstream society. So let me just read that here in case anybody needs to hear it. Society's messaging around alcohol is pretty dumb if you think about it. Here's this addictive substance. We absolutely know it's addictive, but we encourage everybody to use it anyway. Use it to relax, to unwind, and to have fun. Use it to de-stress. Use it to socialize. Use it to enjoy your food and, more generally, your life. Use it when you're happy and when you're sad. Adult life will present you with literally thousands of occasions, from birthdays and weddings to funerals, where you'll be expected to drink alcohol. In fact, you're probably a pretty boring person if you don't use it at every opportunity. So drink up. Oh, and by the way, if you actually get addicted to this known to be addictive substance, well, then you have a big problem and you need to get some self-control and learn moderation. You monster. How could you be so irresponsible? Like I said, I wrote that a couple of years ago in my article from the Bahamas, and that is essentially what we tell people about how fun alcohol is. The only thing I would add at this point is that there is a good bit of messaging about alcohol and masculinity that is even worse than what I just described. So be careful out there. And remember the 4 Stoic virtues: wisdom, temperance, courage, and justice. I've got a couple of episodes about that too. Check out Developing Discipline if you want. That's a pretty good one. Developing Discipline is episode 93. Anyway, if you're thinking about quitting alcohol, please do get in touch if you would like to talk about it. Support this podcast over at expatmadrid.com/donate. I used to tell people that I would spend their donation money on cheap wine and vermouth. These days, I'm just drinking a lot of coffee and sparkling water, so the donations still help, but for different reasons. expatmadrid.com/donate is the donation page. You can also send me a message there. Let me know what you would like to hear more of in a future episode. You could go over to Learn Spanish with Daniel on YouTube. Just go to youtube.com/Learn Spanish with Daniel, or put Learn Spanish with Daniel into your YouTube search box and you will find it. I'm teaching Spanish over there. I made an episode yesterday where I'm talking about the word huevo and huevos and how, huevo could be egg, but it could also be a part of the male anatomy. And there are a lot of important Spanish expressions involving huevos, which you will hear if you are in Spain, and it would be good for you to understand them. I also talk about basic egg vocabulary. How do you say egg whites, egg yolks? How do you say fried eggs or scrambled eggs, etc.? Lots of interesting things in that one. It's only about 7 minutes, so you can learn a lot in a short time. Anyway, that is Learn Spanish with Daniel. You can follow me on Instagram. I am at instagram.com/Daniel Welsh. It only works if you spell my last name correctly, Welsch. I'm highly searchable all across the internet if you spell my last name correctly. Actually, completely unrelated tangent. A guy named Daniel Welsh was stabbed and killed in Wisconsin a couple of years ago, and I have a Google alert set up for my name. So for the longest time, I was getting updates on the story of Daniel Welsh, the murder victim. Anyway, that was a different Daniel Welsh. I am still here going strong in the romantic city of Barcelona. The rest of my day here looks like I'm going to drink some water, have a coffee, work out, eat protein, and then go meditate down at the Buddhist center. So all of the things I talk about in this article, that's just the routine now. I freed up a lot of afternoon and evening time when I stopped doing the whole bar hopping thing. And life is good. Thank you for listening. Thank you for all of your support if you're a donor or a multi-donor, or if you're a listener considering donating for the first time. Thank you for being out there. I appreciate you. One more time from beautiful Barcelona. Hasta la próxima. Bye.